Welcome to Harvey County Digital Talk, a program brought to you by Harvey County Digital. Harvey County Digital Talk, where everything we talk about is the only thing you want to know about local matters that matter. I am your host, Lance Gormley. This week's sponsor is Guerrilla Marketing. Guerrilla Marketing is located at 123 West Broadway in Newton. It doesn't matter whether you're needing a sign, banner, shirt, flyer, or mailer design, printed or both, they can help. Drew works diligently to ensure all customer needs are met and will bend over backwards to help anyone who walks in the door. Speaking of walking in the door, make sure and visit Drew at 123 West Broadway. That's 123 West Broadway for all your apparel, signs, designs, and web needs. Guerrilla Marketing. Our guest for this episode is Harvey County District Court Judge Jason Lane. Jason was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. He attended Wichita Public Schools, graduating from East High in 2000. 2002. We got it. We got the year. Jason later attended K-State University, where he earned a bachelor's in industrial engineering. After completing his undergraduate degree, he went on to attend law school at Washburn University, graduating magna cum laude in 2007, which I'm sure is no easy task. Jason started his law career as an assistant district attorney in Sedgwick County. After 3 years at Sedgwick County, he left to work for a private practice. He did that for 2 years. In 2012, Jason came to work for the Harvey County Attorney's Office, later becoming the Harvey County Attorney after David Yoder's retirement. In November 2021, Jason was appointed to become our new 9th Judicial District Court Judge. He's been married to his lovely wife, Stacy, for 18 years, and they have a 9-year-old son. Welcome to the program, Judge Lane, and thanks for coming on to talk with us.
And good morning, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think about what a judge does, it's kind of like we have this packaged idea in our mind, and then from there we might not know much other of what they do. And in a lot of cases, I think that the relationship that happens between an individual and a judge, let's say, is personal, whether it be a joyous occasion where they are adopting a baby, or whether it's, even myself, a time in life where you've made some bad choices and you just have to have a relationship with that person because you put yourself there. And in the end, it is what it is. But it's not always, wonderful and joyous, like maybe in the case of adoption. And I think sometimes, because it is that personal, that the general understanding of what a judge does and what role they feel and the position that they play or what they do in the community, just maybe people don't really know. So when I talked to you about coming on and having an interview, I was really appreciative that you would, because I think this is just going to be a great opportunity for people to get to know who you are, as well as know kind of what a judge does, and then you could walk us through that process, because you're a new judge, right?
Right.
Congratulations, by the way. Thank you.
Well, first, I wish I had my robe because it's a little chilly in here.
I was going to say.
In the courtroom, we could just put the robe on and get all warmed up.
I love it. I don't know, if you came in here and sat down across the table from me in a judge's robe, I might not. My hands are already sweaty as it is right now. I'm just teasing. But it is, just thinking about things I could ask you coming into this interview. It was funny because I think back to like when we're kids, right? We're the same age. So when I was out there dreaming of what I was going to do when I grew up, it wasn't being a judge. Amazingly, it was actually wanting to be involved in government and politics. It's kind of interesting how lives turn out. But did you ever just sit back, when you were throwing a football at the park with your buddies and think, man, one day I want to be a judge?
No, not at all.
I can't
So if
wait.
you look at my education, I was very good at math and science.
Yeah.
So my thought was, I'm going to be a scientist or an engineer or something technical field, and that's where my trajectory was. And about the beginning of high school, I did a law day, and that piqued my interest, but not to overcome the other stuff. And then it wasn't until in college that I decided I'm going to explore a little more than just the engineering field. And I started taking some pre-law courses, constitutional law, and just really fell in love with how the law worked, how you read the law, the cases, the statutes, and everything else, and put it all together, and how it helps to run an orderly society, pretty much. So at that point, I decided to go to law school and did well there, and looked for my first career. And My wife went along with me the whole time, or pretty much I followed her and went through law school and
Okay.
ended up in Sedgwick County at the district attorney's office. And instead of going into a civil law field, I went into a criminal field. And just the stories that you are exposed to makes you feel like it's very important what you're doing, instead of just trying to resolve a dispute of contracts and decide, how do I word this contract? That didn't interest me as much. I wanted to see how people's lives were affected by the decisions being made by the judicial system.
That's interesting. And you mentioned something, you said your education was very technical, and I'm no attorney by any means, but I do find law interesting as well. And I'm a very technical person, and I like that part of it where, you're presented with, let's say, a problem, and then you can go through and it's all there, right? But you have to just pick it apart and find out, well, when did this happen and that happen? And you can weave your way through all these books to find a conclusion and feel like you've accomplished something. And especially when you're talking about dealing with people, that would be, to me, very weighty. Like, you never had just the idea anywhere through this, maybe, and I'm going off track here, but where you were like, I would rather just deal with contractual agreements in this job because dealing with people, it seems as though there's so much more to that, and you are affecting people's lives. So, I mean, just kind of getting into that a little bit deeper. Why you did say why, but do you is there any connection with just wanting to help people in their lives to do better or be better, or what's the process behind that?
Well, absolutely. You talked about, is there any time you just want to say, no, I don't want to do this? And that happens to everybody. And of course that's happened to me, but it's rare, because what you find out is you start, I was a prosecutor most of the time, you prosecute cases, you meet with victims, and you hold people responsible. And then you understand that you are doing a job that's necessary, a job that helps people and helps, your community as a whole. And it's just that great feeling that you were a part of it, that you made a difference, that keeps you going and continue to go, even in those hard times.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm sure it'd be hard on your heart. So you went to Washburn, and I picked up on something you said. So you went to Washburn to follow your wife, right? You said you followed her, right? So I'm guessing you went to law school Washburn to do law school. I was going to ask, why did you choose the school you did? But was there any other reasons that you were like, hey, I like Washburn Law School over, I don't know, somebody might be a Jayhawker, or what's the deal there?
So I make a joke of it. I followed my wife. She was in pre-law and studying criminology while I was studying engineering.
Okay.
So she kind of got my foot in the door to start the path towards law. And then we both applied across the country, finding a law school. And it actually ended up at Case Western in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And it was a top-ranked school, and we were proud to go there and excited, and spent a semester there, missed home greatly, missed our families, and knew we were coming back to Kansas after law school. So we're like, why did we leave? It was that, need to get out. Mm-hmm. And then you're out and you go, I miss home.
Yes.
So we came right back, and Washburn accepted us back. And
cool.
We applied about 8 different schools, and that was the best fit for us.
Very good. Very good. And Washburn's a great school, from what I hear. So you got out of college. You're living on campus or in the vicinity of Washburn University?
Right.
Okay. And so then you're obviously wanting to go into the workforce, and you're looking for a job. Was it deliberate that you came to Sedgwick County, or do you apply a couple different places? Obviously you're wanting to stay in Kansas. So just walk me through looking for a job and kind of where you got to be in Harvey County, right? And then ultimately our county attorney, which then happened to have you appointed as our judge.
So it's a long path, but let's shorten it up. I actually wanted to go into federal law enforcement.
Okay.
And I was applying, going through the processes, and my wife and I sat down, had a good talk about it, and decided that's going to move us across the country, and we don't know where we're going to be. And because she's a lawyer also, that means many bar exams she'd have to retake. And we decided what's best for us is to stay in Kansas in our local community. So she interned for the district attorney's office, was hired on there right after law school, and encouraged me to go ahead and apply and see what happened. So I put my application in, met with Nola Folson, who was the DA at the time, and she offered me a job on the spot. And I was like, okay, life-changing decision right here.
Yes.
And I accepted, and that's how I started my prosecution career.
Yeah. Yeah, Nola Folsom was a very effective prosecutor. She was responsible for, what was it around, maybe, I might be wrong, but BTK time? Was she not around during that
Yes, she
time?
was.
I remember, she was very effective prosecutor. We'll say that. So going on, you're there, okay? And
Yeah.
are you liking the job? I mean, are you there and you're like, this is the fit for me?
Yes, I was enjoying the job a lot. But I knew in the back of my head I always wanted to go out in private practice at some point just to see if I would enjoy that also. And based on some circumstances, we were able to take a risk of leaving the, weekly paycheck
Yes.
to start a business, and that's what I did. And I practiced mostly criminal defense and family law, and decided I missed prosecuting. That's really where my heart was. So after a couple years, I started searching again. I'd been up to Newton a couple times, met with Judge Dickinson in his courtroom, and really enjoyed the environment and being up here. So when I saw they had a county attorney position open, assistant position open, I met with Mr. Yoder or David, and just fell into place from there, and started working up here. Thought maybe here a couple years, may decide something else, and just fell in love with the community, with the job, with the organizations and agencies I was working with. And about 9 years later, take over as county attorney.
Yeah. And we're a very tight-knit community.
Right.
So as you are going through this process and getting to know people at the county and law enforcement officers and people in the community, it doesn't take long before, I mean, people in the community, right? You go to the convenience store. It's like when I seen you, I went and ran you down, at the convenience store. I was like, oh, there's Judge Lane. I need to ask him about this, And I went over there, and I wonder, if you're in a bigger city or something, that probably is not as likely to happen. I mean, it can, but you really, our community has a very close knit feel to it.
Absolutely.
And so when you're looking at Wichita, right, and you're looking at Harvey County, you work down here, you were probably living in Wichita, but what made you want to make the move? Did it have because of the position that you were going to take, you need to live within Harvey County, or was that part of the decision, or did you just really appreciate the community that we have versus maybe what a bigger city like Wichita has to offer?
Well, it was absolutely both ideas going on at the same time. I really liked the community. I thought it was a great community, and we now had my son, and decided we wanted to raise him in a place that we felt comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of benefits to that in this type of community than the greater Wichita area.
Yeah.
Also, my job, I wanted to continue to be a prosecutor. So to really do that well, you kind of have to be part of that community.
Yeah.
You have to move there and be there every day and live with the people that are relying on you to protect that community.
Yeah.
So the decision to move was an easy one. Now the process is always difficult because everything that goes in with moving.
Yeah, trying to find a house, trying to sell your house the whole bit,
Right.
or whatever.
So it took me much longer to get up here than I anticipated.
Yeah. And I remember, one of the questions I had was you chose to be a Harvey County resident. That's a lifelong commitment, and I think you kind of covered why. But I mean, was that in your mind when you were moving here? Is like, what I'm doing right now is going to wind up being a lifelong commitment to this community?
Absolutely, yes. Because I knew I wanted to be in the same community that I was working with and working for, and I really fell in love with the people here and the interactions. And you're right, I go to the store and I see a lot of people I know, instead of just not a lot of people have it in
Yeah.
a bigger city.
Yeah.
And just knowing that if I needed anything, I could reach out very easily to friends and neighbors who are just right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you needed help with anything, this community seems to be one that just is ready to help. It doesn't matter what, I mean, it really doesn't matter what you're in need of. If you reach out because you are in need, there's somebody there that's just going to be gracious enough to help you if they can. So, why did you submit your name to be a district court judge?
So, working as an attorney, you see the judge position, and of course, that's often a next step.
Yeah.
And it's also what a judge does. I felt what I love to do more than the advocacy part or the arguing part, putting forth the arguments, but being the decision maker has a lot of appeal to it. So when Judge Dickinson said he was going to retire, I decided at that point I'm going to go ahead and try to run for the position and see what happens. I'm going to put my best foot forward, and I felt very fortunate when I got the call and got appointed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so because of your age, I mean, you're 40. I'm not going to say that's young for being a appointed judge. I don't know the statistics on that, but I'm going to say, you will be here in our community doing what you're doing and serving our community for the next 25, 30 years, maybe.
Right.
True. Very true. Because the judge's appointment is a lifelong appointment. Correct.
There is a retirement age of 75 where
Okay.
you have to step down and you could take senior judge status,
Okay.
but you're not the actual judge appointed to that position.
Okay. Okay. And just taking a side road for audience that's listening and might not know exactly that judges are lifetime appointments or what's around that. The other extreme, right? Is there anything a judge can do that would wind up them not being a judge anymore?
Absolutely.
Like,
We do have a judicial conduct commission that any judge who has bad behavior goes before the commission and will have a trial. And
okay.
if they decide that it's bad enough conduct, you'll be removed from the bench.
Okay.
Now, it's an appointed position, but our names go up every 4 years.
Okay.
So we run it's a retention election.
Okay.
So after your first full year of being on the bench, the next general election, your name will go on the ballot. It says, do we retain Judge Lane, yes or no? And then every 4 years after that, your name goes back on the ballot.
Okay. So even though there's not, we don't, as a populace, have necessarily a say in who our judge becomes, the community can still vote basically on whether you're in office or not.
Right.
So it's not I like this guy better than this gal or this gal better than this guy or whatever. It's just you're appointed, and then if for all intents and purposes you haven't done anything egregious, there would be no reason for a bunch of people to try to get out there and vote to have you. Now, and then what's the percentage? Is it over 50? Is there like a majority, or how does that work?
Yes, it's over 50. So
Okay.
over 50% vote no, then you're not retained.
Okay.
But Kansas has both appointments and elections for judges.
Okay.
And it's a district by district decision. So if our community decide we don't want to do the appointment process anymore, we can put it on the ballot to say we want to move to elections.
Okay.
And then the community votes if we want to change our position. There's good things and bad things about each process.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I for some reason just had the general idea that judges were appointed by the governor when a vacancy came open, but of course there's some checks and balances to that. So okay. Walk me through the process of you applied, right? So once you make the initial application, what then has to go into that process for you to complete that, right? So just walk me through what happens. If I was wanting to be a judge and I applied to be a judge, then what's the first, second, third step of that may or may not have anything to do with you?
So first, get a law degree.
yeah, the state of Kansas anyway, right? Because you can't take the bar unless you have a law degree.
So that's going to be 3 years of schooling on top of any kind of undergraduate program. Become licensed, and then after 5 years of practice, I believe you're eligible. I'd have to go back and check that. So I put in the application when the position opens up, and we have a judicial nomination committee
Okay.
that is members of the bar, people who are not lawyers, from both Harvey County and McPherson, who interview all the applicants. And then once interviewed, they decide these are the names that we're going to send to the governor's office for approval. Usually we've had about 20 people apply for positions, and the last couple times there's been about 4 each time.
Okay.
So it's really changed in the last few years. When I went through, there was 4 names. 3 of the names were sent to the governor. And then the governor has 60 days at that point to decide which person's going to be judge.
Okay.
And during that time, you're meeting with the KBI, full background check. You meet with the governor and her attorney a couple times. At this time, it's her. And then finally, near the end, is when you get a phone call, yes or no.
Okay. And so, what was that like to pick up the phone? And I mean, were you expecting to hear a yes, or were you expecting to hear a no? I mean, that's kind of an internal thing with a man. I mean, if it was me, I'd be like, they're not gonna, you know. I mean, the whole time, that's what I'd be doing. You know, thinking because I'm a person that, I don't know, doesn't, like, I realize in a situation that there are other people that might be equally qualified for something. And so then why would they pick me over like that person necessarily? I can see the qualities that person has over myself. So catch me in my mind.
Absolutely.
But were you like,
I was not confident that I was getting the
yes.
yes.
Okay.
at
You
all.
said that in a good, you said everything I just said in a good way, like
Right.
like an attorney would, you know, real condensed.
I really was expecting this was going to be a no, and it'd be at least a good practice for next time if another position opened. So when I got the call, I was anxious, going, okay, this is it, because it's just a Topeka number. That's
Yeah.
the state of Kansas. And when I answered it, and the governor's on the phone, she goes, Jason, you still want to be a judge? I'm like, absolutely. She's like, well, I am appointing you.
That's awesome.
So,
And what day did that happen? Was that like a 10 o'clock in the morning call? Was that an email? You better be waiting by your phone at 5 o'clock sharp because she's calling.
yeah, and you never know when the call's coming.
Oh, no.
It came Monday about maybe 11 in the
Okay.
morning.
Okay.
And it was a week after we had done our interview.
Very cool. Very cool. So you got the call. Did you, was it just like a huge weight lifted off you? Or did you, at that time, or was it like, oh no, now here comes the pressure?
It was a change of weights. So
Okay.
you got the weight of, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where my life's going to go at this point. You know, am I going to continue on with what I'm doing? Is it going to change? And then it's, my life is changing. I have a new career now. I have a new position and
Yeah.
a new responsibility that I have to undertake. And so it's definitely just changing of what am I stressing about today?
Yeah, yeah. It's like at 11, I went right before lunch. I stopped stressing about one thing, and after I had lunch, I thought, oh no, no, I'm right stressing to something else. Oh, okay. So what does a typical day look like for a judge, or is there a typical day?
I would say typical, as in maybe it could be the same one day to another, but nothing's the same. Everything has its own issues, own concerns that are raised before me. So we'll have a calendar. I'll set several cases in one day, and I could hear a criminal case and follow that up with a divorce case, and then maybe a child in need of care where we believe that children are being neglected. And just the issues are different for each and every case, and even within their own little segments, you know. No criminal case is going to be the same because the facts are always different. The relationships are always different in our divorce cases, and of course, children.
Yeah.
And those are our most complicated things, cases we have to figure out.
Yeah, kids. Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm speechless necessarily, but after I've gotten to know you and as we've walked through this process of the interview and stuff, it's very difficult for me to imagine how your job would not be difficult. And I know I'm catching you off guard like that, but that's just what's coming to my mind right now, Jason, is, you mentioned that you deal with children and divorce and criminal cases and stuff. And ultimately, we all want the best for everybody involved, but I could not fathom knowing that every day you have to make those decisions, and I respect you for that. I just have to say that.
And it is difficult, but we don't do it alone, and that's what's important. We have people who work with us in the courthouse. We have agencies that get involved. We have the attorneys who present well-reasoned arguments and why we should take one course or another. And we have the community at large who supports what's going on.
Rule of law.
Right.
Yeah, that we all equally, the rule of law exists and we're all protected by it.
Right.
So since becoming a judge, what's one thing or something that's really been the most challenging thing that you've experienced?
I think the most difficult thing is when you have children involved and you're trying to find what is the best answer for this child. And sometimes there's no best answer. There's some good options and there's some bad options, and trying to figure out how are we going to protect this child growing up who hasn't had an easy life? How are we going to get them back onto a path where they're protected, where they're getting help they need, and making sure that we're making the right decisions for this child instead of placing them in another bad situation. And that can often happen if a child's being neglected and your only options is the foster care system. Who knows if that placement's going to be perfect? There are many, many great foster parents and many great people in that system. But with everything, it can have negative consequences on a child. It's trying to make that decision.
Okay, so the flip side, while we're changing the course here, what's one of the most rewarding things about being a judge?
I think it's the making a difference and trying to help people when they're struggling. Because we see people who are at the lowest part of their life most of the time, whether it's criminal, whether it's in the middle of a divorce, what have you. And trying to offer services through what we're doing on top of any legal requirements we have. So if instead of sending someone to prison because they're probation eligible, because we're told to give them probation, how are we going to set that probation up? Are we going to offer treatment programs? Are we going to offer mental health assistance? And we're going to make that part of our orders to get them back on the right track. In the middle of a divorce that's highly contentious, are we going to look at mediation, trying to get them to come to agreements so everybody can live with the agreement instead of the court just coming in and imposing an order and encouraging that? So it's always good when we can see some benefit or some positive light at the end of a case. And especially in criminal cases, sometimes it's you have the community who's been victimized, you have a person victimized, and making sure that they're safe, that the community's safe, and knowing you played a hand in keeping your community safe.
Yeah. Going a little deeper, and this might be like philosophy, okay? So just looking, I know just looking at over the last 20 years, 30 years, the idea of crime and punishment has changed a little bit. And in my education, I'm able to research this and know and can say how we as a society are choosing to deal with people who break the law is much different now than maybe we would have in the past, especially with the coming awareness of mental health and other things that we really, as a society, need to consider whether that's a contribution to a person's behavior, right? So we're
Right.
dealing with all this, okay? Or even someone who has needs that are not being met as a child, and they have. So we say this. So all this leads up into the point in which somebody's standing in front of a judge to be administered. I'm going to say a consequence. That's the only way I can think of to say it, because it's not always a bad thing, right? Just sometimes it's a consequence that you have to walk through. But with that, how do you believe crime and punishment has changed over your career? And then from there, and this is your opinion, obviously, what does the future of that maybe look like from a judge's perspective?
So as to actual consequences or punishment, I think there's a lot more tools that the courts have available, and if we had more tools, that'd be even better. We now have programs where instead of just supervising a probation, like I said, we can look into treatment options or mental health options. But there's always the consideration is sometimes the only tool we have, and it's necessary, is incarceration. If you have a violent person in front of you who has been convicted by a jury of their peers, that's the tool.
Yes.
You incarcerate.
That's timeout time.
Yes, you take them off the
Yeah.
street and protect the community.
Yes, because you can't.
So we
you know.
still see that. And I think sometimes that gets a little muddier than it used to be, whether to incarcerate that person or not. But we found in the nonviolent crimes, we're using more of the probation options. And it's also resource management. We want to keep incarceration for the very worst offenders and not use those resources for the nonviolent offenders. And that's been a big trend over the course of my career, is trying to separate those out more. Now, in the future, I could see it going further that way, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I do know that the court system is changing, and when I started, like, body-worn cameras from officers weren't very common.
Yeah.
And during my career, it's exploded. Every officer almost has a camera. So what does that mean? On a case-by-case basis, every case now has usually hours and hours, up to hundreds of hours of video. Attorneys have to go through videos presented to the court. So it's good to have that evidence, but it also creates a tax on the system.
Okay.
And I think our system is getting taxed in those areas. So although I think the cameras are great, they're great for producing evidence. We can see, the good and the bad through them. In more reality, it's also the time to go through all the data. And who is that placed on? And it's the public who bears that expense and burden also.
Yeah, because the state. Interesting that you say that, because so first, the difference between non-person and personal crimes. So, for instance, you'd said that you thought there might have been a trend that has happened where people that like drug crimes or things like that, that there's a less likelihood that, or I guess this bureaucracy, I don't know, the judiciary, whatever you want to say, has it seems like it has come to the point where we want to try to push this person towards treatment, not incarceration, right? Just in that example.
It's not just the judiciary, it's the legislative part.
Okay.
Because they make the law saying, how do we sentence this person?
Okay.
So it's commonly referred to as Senate Bill 123. That's our drug treatment law that says if you're an offender convicted of possession of certain drugs on the felony level, you shall be granted probation in most of the cases.
Okay.
Instead of the judge's discretion to place you in prison.
Okay.
So it's the laws that we're handed to say you have to follow these as sentencing guidelines, plus the judge's understanding a lot of this is co-occurring disorders or self-medication, and trying to see if we can solve that problem, because everybody wants the same thing. We want to reduce recidivism, and we want to keep our community safer and safer, and keep going towards that goal.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue is what's the answer? And it's not only just us judges and the judiciary, It's the legislators, it's the executive branch. We all have to come together and find those answers. And as you know, in today's society, nobody agrees.
Yeah.
So
Everything is political, right? We
Right.
can't just, yeah. Sadly. And you know, because you're a non-political entity where you're trying to get, or where you're, like we were talking about, you said the laws, right, are made by that. So if they can't come to a consensus on what they think would be something that should be law, so that the judiciary can, it wouldn't matter how good you think that program would be that would help them out, if they can't get their stuff together to be able to get something passed to make sure you can provide that service to that person, it's not happening.
right.
Okay.
And that's the talk about having the tools
Yeah.
to make our job better. And how do we create those tools, and what should those tools be?
Very good. Okay, so you mentioned, I'm just going to say technology. So because we're the same age, right? I know
Right.
technology has gone, right? When we were kids, it wasn't cell phones. I mean, maybe some people had a cell phone, but it wasn't everywhere, you know? And then all of a sudden, probably about the time you're in college and on, and then cell phones became big, and now everywhere is recorded, and et cetera, et cetera. So before that wasn't the case when you were dealing with law, let's say. Now, are you finding that because of technology, the evidence, just purely the evidence that can be provided in a case is 1,000 times more than what could be in the past, just because of technology being able to record this, that, or the other?
Yeah, it does help for the evidence part of it. And to a point, the evidence was credible, and now we're getting to a whole different world of metadata and being able to alter the electronic evidence and trying to figure out whether this has been altered or not. So now we're in a whole new world that we're coming
Okay,
into.
that goes really deep.
Right.
I didn't even think about that. So you're saying that, like, there may be a possibility in the future where you're looking at a case, or even now, and you're trying to figure out whether this video is actually real video of what's taking place, or whether this is some created thing on a computer that somebody's trying to say happened that didn't.
Right, and that's the reality we live in. It's not common right now, but that's where we're going to head.
Yeah. I don't even want to. Sometimes I just
Right.
wonder. I don't know if I can make it through this technological age. I don't know how people that are, I couldn't imagine. You know, my grandma's 93, just looking at what her life was when she was growing up to today, and then looking at where we are today. It just seems like it's growing so fast.
Right.
So fast. I wouldn't even, I mean, you just blow my mind, man, because I would have never even thought that. I mean, like, that's a part of what you got to figure out. So now we got to have a data specialist on hand, you know, that the people pay for, right?
Right.
Citizens, because this person's entitled to a defense, and you have to make sure that what it is that they're one or the other is credible or not credible. And that's just crazy to me.
And if we don't recognize it's coming, we can't prepare for how we're going to handle the situation. So it's always good to be up on what are the technological advances, what are other courts seeing, what is society seeing. And I think that's where we're at the cusp as. We're going to start saying more and more, can we trust the electronic evidence in front of us or not? Where it used to be you had your camera, it was all filmed on a tape, and
Yeah.
you didn't have that concern.
Yeah, it was on the tape.
It was there, but it was harder to
Yeah.
manipulate.
Where I could just go and create a Facebook account that looks like some Andy over here, right? and then say he threatened me.
Right.
And that's evidence that you'd have to be like, well, that didn't actually come from that person's phone or that person's account. By the time it's all said and done, you've gone through and expelled all kinds of resources just to make sure that somebody wasn't lying. I don't know.
And that's why we have the laws in place, and we try to make sure, because what's the goal? The goal is to find the truth.
Yeah.
And that's why our system is set up. That's why you have an adversarial system. One person says this is the truth. This person says, well, maybe not. And here's why.
Yeah.
And then we put it to our citizens. That's why I have jury trials. It's up to the citizens to decide what is the truth here. And once they tell me this is the truth, then I decide how does the law, or I've given them the law,
Yeah.
and decide what's the consequence here. Did they say this was untrue? A person's acquitted, I dismiss the case, release the person. They say no, the person's guilty, that was the truth, then I put in the consequence for the action. So it's that heavy burden, but our system's great because we do have our community directly involved. We call you in as a juror, and we appreciate the community as our jury because they assist everything and they help protect the rights of the persons in our courtroom to make sure they're getting a fair trial, that a jury of their peers are making the decisions, not just the system itself.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that I've ever heard in my life get excited when they are asked to come to jury duty. But I don't know why it's such a negative thing. I've never had that option. I don't think I've ever got an email sent to me about it or nothing. But
and that was always my first question as a lawyer when I was in a jury trial. Who wants to be here? And you have 30 people, you usually get about 5 to 10 hands. So it's good that people want to. And then you got the people who want to be there, but they could be doing something, more enjoyable. They have lives to live.
Yeah.
And I get that too. We put a burden asking you to come in and sit on our trials. But if you remember the great importance of that role in our system and our society, I think we can all come together and say, yes, we need you here.
So it's an honor to be on a jury. It's a responsibility. Okay, Judge. Can I just call you Judge whenever I see you? Can I be like, what's up, Judge?
You can call me Jason.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
Step into court, you can call me Judge.
All right. Okay, so as always on the program, we give our guests the last word. You can say whatever you want, speak directly to the hearts and minds of anybody listening. The Honorable Judge Lane, what do you got for us?
I would encourage anybody out there, if you have any interest in what we do, come to the courthouse. All our hearings are open to the public, except very specific ones dealing with children, but most of them are open. Ask some questions. Our judges will be glad to come and meet with you after a hearing and answer any questions. And I think the most important thing is everybody just be good to each other. And let's try to make this community as safe as we can.
Well, folks, there you have it. Thanks for listening to this week's program. Good day, good night, or good riddance. Either way, we hope to catch you next time. Tune in or tune out.